And this meeting of the Hopkins School Board is resumed at 7:40 p.m. I'd like to apologize to our community members who are watching via the YouTube live stream. We had an issue with the stream, so we are now on a new stream, and I hope you have found us there. And I'd like to thank our next public commenter, Kristen Bethke, for her patience as we work through this technical issue. So welcome, Kristen.
All right, thank you. I do have a prepared comments. I did time myself. It's about 3 minutes, so I'm hoping I'll keep under the clock. So once again, good evening. My name is Kristen Bethke, and I have a student attending West Junior High. And before you make your decision this evening regarding the mandating a face mask, I would like to cover a few reasons why I think you should reject the use of face masks inside our schools this coming year, or at least allow the children or the parents and the staff to choose how to safeguard their children from COVID-19. After reading the email from the superintendent that came out last week, I'm just gonna kind of paraphrase what she said here. Consistent mask wearing will lessen the requirements for students to quarantine. New guidance does not require entire classrooms to quarantine after exposure, so long as mask wearing protocol has been followed. For these reasons, universal mask wearing is not only the safest option, it is the least disruptive option. Now, from this email, it shows that the district is truly interested in a safe and less disruptive school year. I brought with me a study from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. The information shows the following side effects in adults while wearing masks, and the study states that it can be assumed that the potential adverse mask effects described for adults are all the more valid for children. These are just some of the negative side effects. I don't have time to read them all. There are 19 pages of adverse side effects. Here are a list of a few. Increased breathing resistance, increased blood carbon dioxide, decrease in blood oxygen saturation, increased heart rate, decrease in cardiopulmonary capacity, feeling of exhaustion, increased respiratory rate, shortness of breath, headaches, dizziness, feeling of dampness and heat, drowsiness, decrease in empathy perception, and impaired skin barrier function with acne, itching, and skin lesions. They found an increased reluctance, and then also it was quoted in a German study here, that they found an increased reluctance in children to go to school, unhappiness, impaired learning, drowsiness, and fatigue. I'd like to know how this is safe and less disruptive. Our children are trying to learn. Could you imagine trying to learn wearing one of these for 8 hours under those conditions? It also states that mask use offers the risk of self-contamination by the wearer from both inside and outside, including contaminated hands. In addition, masks are soaked by inhaled air, which potentially accumulates infectious agents from the nasopharynx and also from ambient air on the outside and inside of the mask. In particular, serious infection-causing disease, fungus should be mentioned, but also other viruses. The study goes on to show that
Thank you, Kristen. We're at 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Would you like to leave the article with us?
I would like to leave the end of my comments with you.
Wonderful, thank you.
I would also please suggest that this board be brave and follow science.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Amy Doan to the table.
Good morning, or good evening, I should say. Let me just pull up what I have to say. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've ever felt like it was a need for me to come and speak on my daughter's behalf. My name is Amy, and I'm a mother of 2 girls, one who is enrolled in school in the school district and the other who I intend on having start preschool in 2022. To cut it short, my daughter is, we are currently in the Minneapolis Public School District, but I was concerned for her well-being in enrolling her in that public school system because I read that the ratings for our school were so low that I reached out and found Hopkins Public Schools and was happy with how well she's been taken care of since she started preschool in 2018. So just like I was concerned for her well-being then, when I was first looking to enroll her in school, I am concerned again. I am concerned that this school district is going to decide tonight regarding mask mandates that will solely be based on politics, feelings, and money, rather than a decision based on our children's best interests. I implore you to really think about the damage you will be doing to all these precious children by mandating they wear a grime and dirt-stained mask for 6 to 8 hours a day. I ask you to make your decision based on facts and data, because for some reason, nobody wants to pay attention to the data. Since the beginning of this pandemic until now, because my family lives in Minneapolis, the risk that my daughter gets shot while playing outside is much higher than her getting COVID from someone at school and dying. And knowing that, I still don't make her wear a bulletproof suit before she can play outside. My daughter also has a much higher risk of dying in a car accident as I drive her to school each day than she does of getting COVID and dying. And knowing that, I still drive her every single day to school. If I held her back because of fear we would get in a car accident or fear she would be shot at any moment, then what would I be teaching her? To live in fear? We now have data that should allow us to make better decisions and weigh risks in a common sense way, especially for our children who possess little to no risk at all of contracting COVID, spreading COVID, or dying from COVID. Here's all the data I need as a parent to make the decision for my daughter's physical and mental health that she does not need to be masked. From the beginning of COVID to now, there have been under 400 deaths in children ages 18 and under in the U.S. In Minnesota, there have been 3 deaths of children 18 and under. Children 18 and under make up 23% of Minnesota's population. None of these figures constitute wearing a mask all day. Of the total roughly 7.7 thousand deaths in Minnesota this past year and a half, 3 were someone under 18. That is 0.00039% of deaths being a child. Every single one of those children had major underlying conditions. So with that percentage, we are now talking about forcing everyone's child to wear a mask when there is no data to even support that it does anything at all. In 2018 to 2019, the CDC estimated 480 children died of the flu. If you take those numbers compared to the past year and a half's death count of under 400, you will see the flu is factually more dangerous to children than COVID.
Thank you.
And yet we did not ever talk about mandating a mask. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you use science.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our public commenters via voicemail and in person this evening. We appreciate you being with us. So we'll move to our next agenda item, which is our reports. And as I mentioned earlier, we're so excited to have our student board representatives with us this evening. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Kimura. So Hopkins students are nearing the start of an exciting and never done before school year, with 1st through 7th and 10th graders starting in 13 days on Monday, August 30th, and 8th, 9th, 11th, and 12th graders starting the following day, Tuesday, August 31st, with 14 days left of summer. So I have 14 days left of summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Imani. I'm a senior. And so a lot of students are really excited about the next school year, especially seniors if they're coming in person, so that they can make up for their lost junior year, which was a really stressful time for most people. People are also preparing to start school at 7 a.m. again. As we started at 10, which is difficult for most people. Another thing is that students are also excited for the option of having a later start on Fridays at 10 a.m., but some students expressed that the downside is not having any more late starts with that. So it's kind of a 50-50 support for not having any more late starts. About the swim team, which is what I'm on, swimmers were really, really happy that the natatorium was painted and the vents were fixed, which was something that we were concerned about for a long time. And we also got 2 new coaches, Gillian McNeil and Sam Kendall, who are a really great addition to the swim team, and we already love them so much, even though it's only been 2 days of practice. But there's also a group called the Royal Mentors in Hopkins High School who are working to help new students, new juniors, seniors, and sophomores feel more comfortable coming back into the high school after either missing a full year or just being a new student. But one thing that we might be doing is giving tours during the open houses, one of them being August 25th for new students and families from 3 to 5:30 p.m. And we will also be available on August 30th for sophomores and new students. And that's all I have to say, so thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Are you one of the Royal Mentors?
Yes, I am.
Oh my gosh. Well, your mentees will be in good hands with you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. Any questions from my board colleagues for our fabulous student board reps?
I just have one question. Imani, what did you say was painted?
Oh, the swimming area, like the swimming pool at North Junior High.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, they fixed the walls that were,
Awesome.
yeah, but
Fresh new look.
Excellent. Well, next we'll move to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. I have just a few slides that I'm hoping will pop up on the screens. Maybe.
Yeah, got the presenters for that, right?
Are they turned on?
I think so. Sorry, Mr. Wetter, we're keeping you so busy tonight. I can also start without the slides. I would like to welcome everyone to the 2021-22 school year, and we truly appreciate our community members and parents who showed up for this board meeting tonight. We know we have an important decision to make later on, and we really value the partnership with all of our parents and community members. And this year is going to be one filled with hope and possibility. We're so excited to welcome all of our early learning through grade 12 and beyond students. Leaders and district teams, teachers have been working hard this summer to prepare for our scholars, to prepare for our families. Our leaders have been working hard to prepare for staff. Every new school year is exciting. However, during this unique time, we are prepared for the challenges that will face us, because we are going to be focusing on positivity and restoration for all of our Hopkins scholars and staff. And we're also looking forward to applying lessons learned during the pandemic year that we had last year. On the first slide that you would have seen, there are two pictures from the Raspberry Parade. Oh, sorry, what does that mean? Unplug it back. Okay. Thank you. Oh, nice. Thank you, Mr. Wetter. He's like a magician. So you'll see a couple of pictures here. We had a lot of Hopkins organizations participate in the Raspberry Parade in July. Had a few board members there, and although it was a very hot day, it was also just exciting to see all of the blue and silver, and LMPM, Lean Mean Performance Machine, is always amazing when they show up and provide their music. So I wanted to share some high-level results from a survey administered by the University of Minnesota last fall and spring that garnered more than 23,000 student, educator, and family respondents. And the goal of the survey was to find out what public school stakeholders were grappling with, as well as what in what ways they were experiencing success during last school year. The results were very, very mixed. However, at a really high level, there were specific themes that emerged, and I put those on that slide for all of you to see, and we'll make sure that we post this on the district website so that our virtual participants can take a peek. But, overwhelmingly, all of the respondents agreed that learning did take place during last school year. There was also high-level agreement that mental health support was very much needed, both for students and for staff. In fact, teachers and support professionals across the state reported mental health as their highest challenge. Student engagement, students reported that they felt engaged and experienced success as learners, and many respondents reported success with technology, with COVID safety measures, connectedness, and communication. So I wanted to share this with you because it's important to look at, one of our participants earlier today talked about all of the surveys that we send out, and we really do look at the results from our surveys to inform the decisions that we need to make moving forward. So moving forward, this year we're going to be focusing explicitly on mental health, engagement, relationships, and accelerating learning. I also wanted to share, and I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but we have an instructional data scientist, Abby Holm, who spent hours reviewing the qualitative data from our families, staff, and students from our surveys last year. And these were the themes that emerged. So families overall, so this is sort of what she did is she looked for themes and patterns that came up over and over and over again in respondents' responses. So for families, structure, organization, connection, flexibility, devices, outside resources, and easy access to teachers helped their scholars thrive. And there was really no right method. What worked for some families didn't work for others. So this year and moving forward in Hopkins, we want to focus on flexibility, communication, and connections because those were very salient themes that came through. Our scholars, many scholars reported that they did not enjoy online learning because it was harder to get their work done and tough not to see friends and teachers, which is very understandable. But there's also a lot of variability in that data because we also had scholars say that they thrived in distance or online learning. And so you'll see reflected in our planning that we are building a Hopkins Online Royal Academy to serve students who thrive online, but we also have to think really deeply about what engagements and relationship look like. Students also provided these really amazing personal reflections about what they learned about themselves as learners and as scholars, and they expressed this sense of gratitude for being able to learn more about how they learn. And then staff, overwhelmingly in Hopkins, had a very exhausting year last year. However, many staff talked about being inspired by what they and their scholars accomplished together. And staff reflected on what really matters: empathy, student well-being, scholars being fed. We have an amazing school nutrition department that provided meals to our family during the whole year, including during distance learning. Staff were also really motivated by strong teams and the ability to provide emotional support to students and families. So these themes were very salient and really are impacting our thinking as we move forward this year. So again, this slide just shows you on the right-hand side what we are focused on this year. And then on the left, you'll see a lovely picture of 52 new Hopkins educators that we are welcoming. They are spending a whole week this week engaged in preparing for being a teacher. Many of them are new to teaching. There are some veteran teachers in that mix. And we learned during the orientation on Monday that one of Becky Allen asked the teachers who thinks they have traveled the farthest to work in Hopkins. And, one lady said, Dallas. So apparently, we have someone who moved from Texas to work here in Hopkins, and we're very grateful for these educators who chose Hopkins. I also just want to do a department spotlight. You know, we have so many staff who work so hard for our students and families, and I wanted to highlight, actually, the gentleman that you've seen run all over this evening, Mr. Wetter. He's in charge of this wonderful team, the Technology and Information Services team, and truly, and they're not all represented in the picture, but you'll see their names on top of the picture. All of these individuals have worked this whole summer organizing devices, fixing devices, ordering devices, getting ready for distribution in the fall. There was a lot of refitting of technology that needed to happen. Oh my, I don't know. Okay, a lot of work, infrastructure work at the high school, and so these individuals they're kind, they're giving, and they're tech savvy, and they have worked so hard to support us and our scholars this summer and for next school year. I also wanted to share that we gathered together about 45 of our Hopkins leaders, so that's all principals, assistant principals, district office, system leaders, and individuals who support those district office leaders in 3 days of just team building and also leadership capacity building. So we spent about 4 hours on that obstacle course that exists on the high school. Have you ladies been on the obstacle course? Oh my, it was very scary. We'll have to, maybe we can do a student board rep retreat at the obstacle course.
Do it.
So there were lots of, I say, non-life-threatening activities, although, you know, when I was on that giant swing that throws you into the air about, 50 feet yonder, I did wonder if I was going to perish in that moment. So we did an obstacle course and then 2 full days of just diving deep into our instructional priorities, our lab operating system, what it means to be a flattened organization and work across teams, leadership goals, Vision 2031, and it was really wonderful. I also wanted to share with our community that we're going to be putting together some community engagement sessions that staff, students, and parents will be invited to. There are some big system questions that we'd like to have our stakeholders help us answer. So, for example, is there a way to permanently organize a later start time for our secondary scholars who could use more sleep in the morning, right? Their biorhythms are different from elementary students, and so later start times for secondary. Would our families support earlier start times for elementary age students if we have to, do some kind of a flip? Should 6th graders learn at the middle school, and should we invite 9th graders to learn at the high school? What do our families and community imagine if we look at the future of learning and really reimagining the schooling parameters that best serve our students? Might we transform one of our 6 elementary schools into a year-round school? We have a couple of really great year-round schools in Rochester. It's like a 45-day on, 15-day off model that apparently educators and families really, really love. Is that something that we would want to try out here in Hopkins? And then, of course, how do we make online synchronous and asynchronous learning experiences be a permanent feature of our schooling, right? So that it's not just strictly in person or distance, right? We want to be flexible. Remember, families are asking for flexibility. What does it look like for us to be flexible? And then how might we evolve senior year into outside of school experiences so that our seniors can partner with business, with community, with internships that more effectively prepare them to be matched with a career, a gap year placement experience, the military, college, etc. So please look for information on these community engagement sessions designed to provide information and ask what you think. And then finally, I think this is my final slide, but we had a lot of scholars of all ages in for summer programming for the last 3 months. So obviously I'm not going to like list every one of these. You can read that for yourself, but lots and lots of scholars. And we're so fortunate to have educators who stepped up to lead a summer experience for students, as well as recent graduates. We had recent graduates at our parks working with the little ones, and there was, a lot of enrichment this past summer. And it's good because we want to provide learning year-round for students so that we have continual engagement. Oh, no, that's not the last slide. One more. Okay, so just quick back to school information. I talked a little bit about the online Royal Academy that we're building. I think one of our student board reps provided back to school dates because they are different based on, which grade level a scholar is starting. And we talked about the secondary start times with no change to elementary. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. It is obvious that the team has been hard at work preparing for another great year that, of course, will not be without its challenges. So with that, any questions for Dr. Mary Perry Reed from my board colleagues? Okay, so next I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll just do a voice vote for this one, Clerk Peterson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second, actually, too, to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson, I will have you do this one.
All right. Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Kahn.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye. Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to our Treasurer's Report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Included in your packets this time is the enrollment report for every month during the 2021 school year. And as you could note, we budgeted for 6,758 students last year. And we started the year with 6,645 students in October, and that was 113 less than what we had budgeted for. So our budget was greater than the students attending. We peaked at 6,656 students in April, and then ended the year with 6,631 in June. So that we ended with 127 less than budgeted, or a 1.8% decrease. That maybe sounds like a lot, but compared to what I've observed with other school districts in the state, it's on the low side. Some districts saw as high as 6% decreases. So I think we can feel fortunate in that category. Surprisingly, we budgeted for 515 kindergartners, and we ended the year with 525. So we ended the year with more kindergartners than we had budgeted for last year, a 1.9% increase. And what I have read, not just in Minnesota, but across the nation, was that kindergartners were the ones most likely to eschew their first year. And a lot of parents held their kindergartners back for the coming year, so we did not experience that. And to me, that kind of points positively to the future health of the district. Expenses for the 2021 school year, as of June 30th, were 94% of budget. Now, I will warn the board and viewers at home and here that we're going to see more expenses come in. we don't close the books until about, typically around September or October, because there are some lingering expenses that come in at the end of the fiscal year. But nonetheless, I think we're going to end up certainly less than 100% of what we had budgeted. So that's positive. Expenses of note this time in the checks that we issued during the summer included numerous checks for scholarships for graduating seniors, nearly $12,000 for work on the courtyard at Tanglin. And I'll be curious to stop up there and see what improvements they've made to the courtyard there. Nearly $12,000 for new jerseys for the boys hockey team. So those need to be refreshed on a regular basis. I'll be curious to see what those look like. Numerous expenditures for food and related cafeteria type items, napkins, straws, silverware, whatever. But we continue to feed our scholars during the summer and their families. So we're continuing to incur expenses for feeding our families. Over $8,000 for textbooks. Yes, we still use textbooks in some cases in the district. And then hundreds of thousands of dollars for software licenses. That's more and more a component of how we conduct business within the district and how we do education. And those always seem to come up the first of the fiscal year, which is July 1. So we incur a lot of expenses for software at that point. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $15,124,319.27 for the period May 25th, 2021 through August 9th, 2021.
Thank you, Treasurer Adams. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Kahn.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye, thank you, Clerk Peterson. 6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Next, we'll move to new business, and the first agenda item is our Hopkins Public Schools Health and Safety Measures for the 21-22 school year resolution, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. As Dr. Lightfoot is approaching the table, I'll just provide a framing, and then I think we have mitigation team members who are going to be joining us virtually. Nick? Correct. Okay. So as a number of us have shared earlier, our early learning through grade 12 plus students are very excited to start school in a couple of weeks. And in addition to providing a high quality education for each and every student, we have a very important responsibility, which is also a collective responsibility to work toward ensuring the health and safety of our students and staff. And understandably, many of us are apprehensive due to the risks with COVID as well as the new Delta variant. We have a district COVID mitigation team that has been meeting weekly and last year daily for more than a year. The team is comprised of our head district nurse, her right-hand nurse, our coordinator of health and safety, a benefits specialist, and our assistant superintendent and head of human resources. This is a very conscientious team that has not only great expertise, but a high level of care for those that they serve. They are also well connected to the Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Education, and are very familiar with all of the guidelines that come out of the CDC and other important information agencies. The fact is that strong mitigation measures layered together worked well for us last year, especially here in Hopkins, but also across our nation's schools. And while experts agree that masks work as an easy, cost-effective, and simple mitigation measure. We also have listened to, as we did this evening, we have read, and we do respect the handful of requests from parents who express opposition to our masking recommendation. We do value all voices and realize there are multiple perspectives on this life-threatening issue. In the end, our job is to make a decision that is in the best interests of all 7,000 students and staff that we serve. And we know that in-person learning is incredibly important for our scholars, and so we need to figure out a way to get our students back to in-person learning in a way that best mitigates the credible threat of increased viral spread. So with that framing, I invite our Hopkins COVID mitigation team, led by Dr. Lightfoot, to introduce themselves, or he will introduce them, and then share with our school board and community the information that undergirds and also informs our recommendation this evening. Dr. Lightfoot?
Certainly, thank you. I will try to make sure as we coordinate here with me being in person as well as members of the team being virtual that we can coordinate what that looks like. So we may have to tap into Interim Director Wetter's assistance to support that. But I'll go ahead, introduce myself. I'm Nick Lightfoot. I'm the Assistant Superintendent. And we'll ask members of the team who are with us virtually to introduce themselves also.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Martin, and I am the lead district school nurse.
Good evening. Please go ahead, Julie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Kaczmarek, and I am the District Benefit Coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Goldie. I am the Environmental Health and Risk Coordinator.
And I'm Laura Kelzer. I am the nurse at Eisenhower Jingching and worked closely with Mary Jo and the team this year.
As Dr. Mary Perry Reed mentioned, it has been work throughout the course of the summer as we've been looking at data from the previous year, looking at the recommendations that have come forward, and really trying to look at the best interest, as was identified, of how we run our program, the way in which we consider the impacts to individuals, to families, and that work has really brought forward some, I think, key salient data points that I think would be helpful to point out. Mary Jo, could you speak to some of the data points specifically regarding our work last year that you've identified kind of in some of the, if anybody did have a chance to see it, the segment that she did with WCCO to speak to some of the mask considerations that were out in the community. And there were a couple key data points that we wanted to make sure that the board and the community were aware of regarding our work last year.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lightfoot. I'd be happy to do that. So want everyone to know that the nurses and Julie in particular kept data. We wrote down everyone in a spreadsheet who we considered either a close contact or a positive case. So our numbers last year were on the staff side, we had 76 positive staff, and we quarantined 501 as close contacts. And then on the student side, we had 250 positive cases, and we quarantined 3,342 students, which was a lot. We estimate that there may have been 2 instances where there was in-school transmissions in all of those cases, but most of the positive cases could be tracked to community transmission or household transmission.
Mary Jo, I think it might have glitched on a couple of those numbers. Could you just repeat those numbers one more time?
Certainly. On the staff side, we had 76 positive cases, and we quarantined 501. And on the student side, we had 250 positive cases, and we quarantined 3,342 students.
Thank you. I think some of the other points that we have looked at throughout the course of that, and maybe one of the more, I would say, mindful points that really the committee weighed when we looked at it. Maybe Laura and Mary Jo, you can speak to the quarantine impact and thinking from last year into what we would want to have coming forward into our future year.
Certainly. Laura, do you want to speak to that point?
I'm currently having some internet challenges, Mary Jo, but I will see if it will let me stay on. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the most impactful to the kids' education if they can't be in the school. Trying to balance all of their distance learning, especially when it's individual situations. You know, when the entire class and the teacher were all out, we were able to manage that in a different way than the scattered individual situations. So this year, we're still waiting on some very important guidelines from the Minnesota Department of Health. Many of you will remember the decision tree we used a lot last year to help guide some of those quarantine decisions. We are still waiting for that guidance from the state. They're in the process of updating it. But we are looking at some of the similar aspects of last year, particularly focusing in on actual positive cases, either in a home or in a student. Beyond that, we're still kind of working out some of those details, I guess. One of the areas we kind of are looking at is how we will implement the contact tracing piece. The big takeaway, I think Dr. Lightfoot mentioned that earlier, is the new close contact guidelines. Now, if both the positive case and the close contact were masked, we no longer need to consider that close contact. So that's a huge impact in hopefully not going down that route of needing to quarantine entire classrooms, which will hopefully decrease our numbers substantially this year. Mary Jo, do you have anything on that as well?
Well, in regards to the quarantine, anyone who has been fully vaccinated does not need to quarantine. That's a big change too. We have a lot of pluses on that side. So we estimate that 85% of our staff is vaccinated. And I ran numbers today that I can get from Infinite Campus, as we can upload COVID immunization data from the statewide registry. And so for our secondary students, it's inching up there. And as of today, we have in our secondary schools, those are the students that are 12 and above, fully vaccinated is between 46 and 49% in the 3 buildings, and partially vaccinated is between 50 and 52%. That number has risen, and I noticed that about 75% of that number of the kids that have only had 1 shot, they've received it in the last 2 to 3 weeks, so they're not yet due for their 2nd shot. So that's encouraging.
Those are some of the data points that have been, front and center with the mitigation team. I think, Jeff, would you like to speak to more of the layered approach and how that's kind of also been part of the mitigation strategy that the group has been looking toward as we think through the recommendations that are in front of the board this evening?
In addition to wearing masks, the other 3 W's still apply. So when sick, stay home, wash your hands, and watch your distance. In addition to those 4 W's taken together, we are still focused on our ventilation mitigations for maximizing fresh air and room turnover. And we are still looking at the ability to facilitate disinfection when needed, when we have knowledge of an issue in a classroom. And we will still provide staff for spot disinfection as needed on an isolated basis. And for their comfort, we will supply them with disinfectant as an additional layer. All of these layers are underneath the biggest layer, which is prevention, which is vaccination. We have sent out the Vax to School poster. We encourage everyone who is eligible for vaccination, 12 and up, throughout your family, whether you're a student or not, to seek vaccination. What we're seeing with this variant is it is reported to be 2 to 6 times more contagious than the original variant. And once it gets into a household, it tends to infect everyone unvaccinated in that household. There's been a lot of information about breakthrough cases. Breakthrough cases, as far as we know, have not exceeded 1% of people who have been vaccinated. So that's good news. That's affirmation that so far with this Delta variant, vaccination is working. And even those breakthrough cases that are occurring, we are seeing very little in the way of hospitalization or serious illness. On the flip side, however, we are seeing in hospitals about 95 to 99% of the cases arriving there are unvaccinated people. And we're seeing similar, unfortunately, similar issues with fatal cases.
And finally, part of our work last year as well was trying to manage staffing situations. And I want to do a call out to all of the work that Julie Kazmierek does in employee benefits to be that first point of contact, that if individuals do have questions, we do have the space available for the symptom checking, for calling to make sure that if there's any concern, we have individuals ready to talk people through that decision tree. Julie, anything you would want to call out into the space about some of the additional information about making sure that we're doing our best to keep as many staff as we can in front of our young people?
Yeah, sure. I just want to encourage staff to continue. If they have questions about whether or not they should be in person, definitely reach out to myself, and I know the nurses take those questions as well. So I definitely ask that staff continue to reach out and verify, get answers on what they should do. Should they be in person or should they stay home?
So as far as the layered approach, what you have in front of you this evening is that comprehensive work that the mitigation group has put together for the board this evening. We know with that, the resolution that is in front of you, there are likely questions and discussion points for you as a board. And as a group, we are here to be of reference and information for you as best we can be. And with that, Chair Bouchard, we are available for additional questions as would be helpful.
Thank you very much to the team for providing that preliminary information for us as we consider the resolution before us. And I'd like to invite questions or comments from my board colleagues.
Chair Bouchard?
Yes, Director Peterson.
I really want to thank you guys for the information regarding the number of positives and then the resulting quarantine students. And then Dr. Lightfoot for the repeat of that, which got us a much different view. I was really surprised to hear that 250 of our students were tested positive during the 2020-2021 school year before the Delta variant. That number was really shocking to me. The number of students quarantined last year was not shocking to me, being a parent of children in the district and experiencing a few quarantine ourselves. But those data points for me were brand new, and I really appreciate them. I think for me personally, the idea of truly keeping our kids in school continuously during the 2021-22 school year is priority numero uno. I think that in-person learning is most of us want is really what we need to be focused on. So thank you for those data points.
Thank you, Director Peterson. Before I move on to my next board colleague, just for those of you who are joining us via the YouTube live stream, the resolution that we're considering and the mitigation plan starts on page 339 of the board packet. I know sometimes our board packets are a little overwhelming. We feel that way too. So I just wanted to give you that reference point so that when you hear us talking about the resolution and the mitigation plan, you have that in front of you as well. So who's next?
Chair Bouchard,
Director Cool,
is it okay if I ask 3 questions?
please.
Okay. So Dr. Lightfoot and team, so first, we've heard a lot from parents. We've heard a lot on both sides from parents. Can you provide us a little bit of information how faculty and staff have, what they provided for feedback and what their overall feeling is with the recommendation that was sent out?
I could speak to that a little bit. Laura, Mary Jo, anything that you might speak to first?
I have not heard from many staff. I'm the nurse at West, and I've been in the building, and the responses that I've heard are pro face covering. So they understand that even though our secondary vaccination rate is greater, they understand universal face covering with the Delta variant just transmitted, high transmission in our community right now is needed.
And then I know that I know last year we talked a lot about the mental and social issue concerns that masks provide, and I know that it was talked about last year, additional services that were being provided. Can you talk a little bit about what discussions you've had internally about the going back to school in person and taking into account some of the social or mental concerns that students can have of wearing a mask?
I think the overwhelming goal that we have is for in-person learning. And so I think students and staff realize that to achieve the goal, we're going to have to layer our mitigation strategies. And they did prove to work last year, and we're hoping even with the more virulent Delta variant, we will continue to have low transmission rates within the school.
Laura, do you want to speak to the early learning perspective from the elementary?
Yeah, I mean, in general, again, the elementary is coming from a different standpoint where we know the vast majority of our student population is not able to be vaccinated. So I think there's a greater understanding of the necessity when we're dealing with our population age-wise. In general, my experience last year as the nurse at Eisenhower Xinjiang, the kids did wonderfully. It's a learning curve. There are challenges. They do need encouragement and reminders, but they did really well as far as the masking went last year, on the elementary side at least. So hopefully they're getting used to it, unfortunately or fortunately. So.
And Jeff.
In terms of providing PPE for students and staff, the thing that I observed was that most students took very well to the mask. We had a fraction of students who had issues adjusting, but the benefits of wearing a mask in class last year certainly outweighed any concerns we encountered. And for those concerns that we did encounter, I believe the special services teams in the schools and others in the schools did an excellent job of adjusting the routine and adjusting the ability for that student to cope with a mask or to put in other mitigation measures that will allow them, for genuine medical reasons or behavioral reasons, to not wear the mask but to make sure that they weren't a risk to other students in the population as well.
Thank you. And just one last question. So I know you had mentioned roughly 85% of faculty and staff are vaccinated. Can you just give me a little bit of background of, have we thought about trying to mandate vaccinations and pros and cons, or ability to do that versus not being able to do that?
Sure. Jeff, do you want to speak to some thoughts on that one?
Yeah, our estimates are 85, and Mary Jo's being conservative, 85%. It could be as high as 95% of our staff are vaccinated. With regard to a mandate for staff, I think the key question would be, what would we gain by mandating it for the remaining 15%? Perhaps a more prudent approach would be, and we've talked about this amongst ourselves, would be to discreetly survey the staff, gather some realistic data to the extent that we can, because staff always have the option to decline to answer that question. And then once we have the survey data, then figure out how best to cover the gap, either through voluntary measures and encouragement or the mandate. From my perspective, I think the carrot is always better than the stick. And if we get there and close the gap, once we identify the actual size of the gap, I think we're in pretty good shape.
I really appreciate all your answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Cool and team. Any other questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Bouchard.
Oh, wow. It's like in stereo. Director Adams.
I defer to Vice Chair Andreessen.
Then it's Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you, Treasurer Adams. I am wondering about, I just saw an announcement that the state, the MDH is going to be providing testing for schools. And I'm wondering, given our layered approach to mitigation and safety, how will we be utilizing that testing?
Sure. We were fortunate to be in a call with Commissioner Mueller at about 4 o'clock this afternoon, where they were first providing basic information around the testing components of what that would look like for the school year next year. Those are comprehensive and a focus on all individuals having the opportunity to test, students and staff. They're also looking at additional testing options, and those additional testing options would include rapid as well as PCR tests. Mary Jo and Laura can speak more to the medical nature of the differentiation between the tests. But their comprehensive approach is really looking at, will we be able to, through our testing measures, offer our community the opportunity to look at various options depending on what is arising from the sets of circumstances that we're experiencing as we go through the year. What we are looking at is we have specific numbers of test kits that were available from our previous year, PCR saliva tests from Vault that were used. So we are well equipped with our number of those that are available, and we did have some practices and protocols at the end of last year for students and families to access those tests. We also had protocols for our testing of staff that were available. And based on the information that we have today, now that we'll have some different options to look at, we'll have a comprehensive review. Tomorrow, all of the state school nurses will be on a call, and there will be additional information about how to access those testing kits. There's also, I believe in the press release, there were, I want to say 169, I thought it said 169 million in grant funds for the testing protocols. So there would be significant dollars and resource throughout the state for districts to access this testing as a component throughout the course of next year. So it's newly emerging information that, just like I said, came out as far as we got it this afternoon at noon, and then we're on with the commissioner at 4, more to follow tomorrow. But once we have that information, we will be looking at the available protocols. Part of the difficulty is what that looks like for the staffing of that. What does it mean for us if we have some of the kits being nasal swabs? Who can do those? Who delivers that information? How do we then keep that information? So there's some other items that we have to think through systemically, but we'll get through that as we think through these next couple days now with what we've just learned.
Right, thank you.
Mary Jo, you were also on the call. Laura, Julie were on the call. Anything that I missed there?
No, I think you did a good job. I just look forward to our school nurse call tomorrow to get more information.
Laura, I think there was one point that you put in bold from your notes from that session. Do you want to speak to that 54%? That caught my attention.
Yeah, that got mine as well. It was a very short meeting on the phone today, but one of the pieces of information they mentioned that I had not heard yet is they said that comparative to where we were last year at this time, I believe the number was 54% higher cases right now. So that really kind of drove home, last year's kind of blurred together in my mind, but we really did start last year in September as we were slowly starting to bring our students back in hybrid model and with all our variations. Our case rates were substantially lower than they are right now, but I had not heard that until today, that it's 54% higher right now than it was at this time last year.
Is that Minnesota as a whole?
That's I can't quite speak to that. I suspect so. I believe it was Heather Mueller who had that statement in there. But again, it was all a phone conference today, so I didn't get to see anything in writing that I can speak to that.
And Jeff?
Has left the meeting.
Thank you, Nick. Just a couple points to add. What we're seeing case rate wise from the University of Minnesota site and from the weekly data we obtained from Hennepin County is that we're right now in terms of case rate looking a lot like May. And what we're trying to do with these mitigation measures is to avoid us looking like April or worse yet, last winter, when we were at very high, much higher surges than where we're at now. We're in a surge now that is forecast to last another 4 to 7 weeks. What we don't know is how severe that surge will be compared to the previous ones we've already had. Logistically, from what I've read so far, and I await further information like everyone else does tomorrow, a significant change in what the state is proposing in this surveillance testing is to do it or offer it weekly. So we will have to address that in our planning. The other item to keep in mind, planning-wise for everyone, is last spring when we continued to offer surveillance testing, the participation dropped to very, very low levels for both students and staff. We didn't have any students taking us up on it. And our thinking is, especially for older students that were eligible at the time, 12 and up, they didn't want to know really the results because of the impact on participation and other things. So I think we want to learn more tomorrow about what the recommendations are from the state, what the logistics will look like in terms of the change from biweekly to weekly, and then what they would forecast or anticipate in terms of participation.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question? So are we thinking that testing based on this new information might be one of the layers that we have as part of our mitigation plan?
Yes.
We just don't know what it's going to look like, the details.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Bouchard.
Director Adams.
Thank you. I've got a question for Mary Jo Martin, and I'm rather alarmed that only 46 to 49% of our secondary students who are eligible have gotten vaccinated. Do you have any idea why they haven't taken advantage of it? They are eligible for $100, aren't they?
They are, well, I think that expire, what is today? The 15th, August 15th. Very good question, Director Adams. I believe, and this is all, and I haven't polled our surrounding districts to see if they know. I am working with MIC, the Minnesota Immunization Information database, to where Hopkins is going to be a pilot district, whereas we can give them our student names and their birth dates, and then they are going to give us the exact data, or just a composite data bulk query. There'd be no names associated with it. It'd be more exact as to who's how many are immunized. So, and then we could compare districts, which would be interesting to see if we're not. I just think it's the the public has a lot of opinions pro and against vaccination for adults and children, and I think that's affecting ours. We did host a vaccinate clinic for students, or it was for students and staff or any community member actually in June. And we had, I think, what did we have, Jeff and Laura? About 750 vaccinations we gave out. So we've tried to offer it and make it easy for families, but that's where we're at right now. I do see that number going up as students, I believe, go in for their sports physicals and their 7th grade immunizations, because we are requiring those this year, and asking families to supply us with the updated immunization data, that I'm seeing more and more getting the COVID shot as well.
All right, thank you.
Other questions and comments from my board colleagues? I have a relatively straightforward question for the team. So last year we provided various PPE, masks included, for staff and students. If the board accepts the recommendations this evening, will masks continue to be provided for staff and students this school year?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to speak to the orders that have been placed?
Yes, I have, in anticipation of some need, I have already received 100 boxes of 50 disposable child-sized masks for the elementary schools. I have ordered and hope to receive a week from yesterday a pallet of cloth masks for child-sized individuals for our grade schools. We have an abundant supply of adult-sized disposable and cloth masks throughout the district and at district headquarters. I think we'll be fine with providing masks to meet any needs. I would expect the need for staff to be fairly low. I would expect the need for older students to be fairly low. I think what we want to prepare for, and that's why we've placed those orders, is meeting the needs for our younger students.
Thank you very much. In other districts in the state that have decided to require masks, they're doing so for ages 2 and up. And we have in this proposal before us a recommendation for masks on students ages 2 to 5, and then the requirement, older than that. Could you explain a little bit of the thinking behind that recommendation?
Sure, I can. Mary Jo, Laura, do you want to speak to the early childhood, or I'm happy to as well?
You can go ahead.
Sure. Part of the work with Director Chauvin and the work at Harley Hopkins has been working on creating the skill sets for school readiness. And as they work with their young people, some of them are able to fully wear the masks. Others of them, when they work with them, they develop the skill set for any period of time so that they can wear that mask for an extended period of time. So with the requirement versus the recommendation, that was done on the developmental skill sets with Director Chauvin and what they had experienced through the course of last year, and looking at getting them mask ready, developing that skill set. So their request was that we have that be the recommendation for them, with the idea that as soon as they were ready, that would be what they would drive toward, but they're building that skill set and that readiness.
Thank you very much.
I should point out, though, the one thing that is different on that required element is the federal regulation on the school bus, and that will be the requirement on the school bus.
Thank you. So I wanted to provide a little bit more context for the board. One of my responsibilities as board chair is responding to all of the emails that come in through the contact the board form or any email that's addressed to the full board. And it's actually a responsibility that I really enjoy because I get to interact with community members and then really have a good understanding of how many people are contacting us regarding a certain issue, what their viewpoints are. My board colleagues, I know, read all of the emails as well, so they already have an understanding of this, but I went through the work this afternoon of totaling the emails that we've gotten from community members. So I'd say we've been talking about masks and requiring versus recommending in our community for about the past month in an intense way, meaning that's kind of the time period when we've gotten the most communication about it. And between July 15th and 7 p.m. this evening, we had received 53 emails asking for masks for all across the district, and 17 emails asking for no masks or flexibility within masking. So in addition to the community members who joined us this evening via voicemail or in person to give their input, I wanted to make sure that those email comments were reflected in the discussion as well. We've had people, no matter what their opinion is about it, asking us to follow the science. And some of the resources that I've been using to really understand this science and to understand it in a contextual way, meaning how Delta is spreading within school environments and how we can mitigate that spread. I've been turning to nationally recognized public health experts like Dr. Andy Slavitt and Dr. Michael Osterholm. Andy Slavitt's podcast In the Bubble, he has an episode that came out recently that is specifically about schools, and interviewed two other experts. One was an expert on HVAC, which we've talked a lot about, just air circulation and mitigating that way. We've talked a lot about that at this board table, right, Vice Chair Andreessen? And so the recommendations given in that podcast were very paralleled very much the recommendations that we're seeing before us tonight, just this idea of layering mitigation strategies so that we can protect our students. And Dr. Michael Osterholm, for those of you who have followed his work throughout the pandemic, he does not sugarcoat, and he has been predicting this surge for months, and is really stressing the seriousness of Delta and the threat that it's posing in our communities. In Hennepin County, we've crossed over that 5% positivity rate that's been kind of out there as a marker of concern throughout the pandemic. And so, just keeping all of these data points in mind as we move forward and vote on this recommendation for layered mitigation strategies, I think is important.
Bouchard.
Yes, Director Adams.
Along those same lines, I'd like to point out to people that may be watching and in the audience that we've been given lots of references to other research that says that masks don't work or that they're detrimental. In fact, I've got one here in front of me right now alluding to the dangers of masks. And what I found interesting about most of those is that it's either outdated data or doesn't include any data at all. And in particular, there was one that we were referred to by someone that emailed to us that pointed to an article that was written prior to the COVID COVID pandemic, it was March 31st of 2020. And I was a little surprised at that because there was no wave of COVID at that point to even make a comparison. So, and it certainly was definitely not during the Delta variant. So the information wasn't that useful to me. Also, the dangers of masks that the same gentleman, Paul Alexander, pointed to. He talked about all the possible dangers, but didn't say, were there any outcomes? Were there, in fact, any dangers that were experienced by people? It was a very subjective, thought about what could happen, but I haven't heard of anyone dying from wearing a mask. I have heard of people dying of COVID. In fact, I've had a dear close friend of mine die as a result of it. I've known many people who have gotten infected by it. It's not fun. And for people like myself who are immunocompromised, who have got respiratory issues, I dread it. I really dread it. So I think we have to take the most dramatic step that we can to make sure that our kids don't get infected. And just because someone's kid doesn't want to wear a mask, or the parent doesn't think they should wear a mask, it's for other kids that we're concerned. It's not just your kid, it's all the kids around that child. So that concerns me. And I believe that learning can take place while you wear a mask. So I just don't think anyone's given me any data that says that kids are learning less because they wear a mask. I know it's not optimal, but I'm sorry, we've got to do it for the benefit of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adams. Any final comments or questions for the team? Yes.
I have one question. I'm wondering, I know that Dr. Mary Perry Reed, you mentioned that we're launching the online Royal Academy. And I'm wondering, is this an option that could be accessible to parents or students who may not want to go to school wearing a mask?
Absolutely. So we do have registrants that are grade kindergarten through grade 12. I don't remember the grade by grade breakdown, but I do know that we have little learners registered and older learners registered. And what we are theorizing is that many parents and caregivers of our elementary age students are registering for the Online Learning Academy because they do have concerns about COVID. Their concerns are mostly about around health and safety, COVID, Delta variant. And then we're thinking that many of our older learners perhaps discovered that they do thrive in an online environment. So whatever the reason or the rationale is, this is a learning model that is open to every family, and we will staff it accordingly.
And I'm just wondering, given the timing of this, can people still make that choice? Can families choose to opt into that option based on perhaps how the vote goes today, or would it be?
I think so, but we have our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, I believe, on the Google Meet. Anne, if you're there, could you confirm that families can still register at this time for Hopkins Online Royal Learning Academy?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, We are right now, even just in the last couple of days, seeing our numbers trend up just slightly over 300. And so the registration for the online academy is still open for now. We are considering closing it by the end of the week so that we can make sure that we are staffed appropriately based on the needs and the desires of our families who may want their students to participate in the online academy.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Chief Asher,
Yes, Director Cool.
I just have one more comment.
Absolutely.
So, all board members over the last few days, I've been really having a hard time thinking through all of the pros and cons of this, and I just kind of want to verbalize it a little bit. It's very difficult for me because I personally, as I sit here in a mask, have a hard time breathing in some ways. And what's interesting about that is, as much as I hate masks, I've almost died from COVID. Having a blood clot move from my lungs to my heart, which we thought was a heart attack, but it was actually COVID related. And I've been dealing with the effects of COVID now for almost 16 months. I'm considered a long hauler, and I know how much it sucks and how horrible it is for a person. And the balancing act that I'm trying to do in my head is how much I know the negative piece of wearing a mask is versus what I feel like being sick, and knowing so many of the teachers and students. If one kid had to go through what I went through, I don't think I could live with myself. Sorry, that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Director Cole. Any other comments or questions at this point? Questions for the team? Well, before we move on to our motion and our vote, I just want to thank the mitigation team, the COVID team, for being with us this evening, and for the really nuanced work you've done creating this mitigation plan. And we appreciate your patience with our questions, many of which are questions and concerns that we've heard from our community members that we wanted to bring forward this evening. So thank you very much. I think I'm supposed to read the resolution and then I'll ask for a motion, if that's okay with my board colleagues. Reading in a mask, it's my favorite thing. So again, for our community members who are viewing at home, the resolution begins on page 339 of the board packet. Whereas Minnesota State Statute Section 123B09 vests the care, management, and control of independent districts in the school board, and whereas the superintendent of Independent School District 270, hereinafter the superintendent, is responsible for the management of schools, the administration of all school policies, and is directly accountable to the school board. And whereas when responsibilities are not specifically prescribed nor school district policy applicable, the superintendent shall use personal and professional judgment subject to review by the school board pursuant to school district policy 302, superintendent. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, have determined that the COVID-19 pandemic is currently ongoing and may remain ongoing for an unknown time. And whereas the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on educational issues related to COVID-19. And whereas the MDH has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on public health issues related to COVID-19. And whereas the superintendent and the administration of the school district have conferred with the school board regarding COVID-19 health and safety measures, the current CDC, MDE, and MDH requirements for each, and other relevant information. And whereas based upon the collective consideration of these factors, the superintendent has recommended to the school board that the following Hopkins Public Schools COVID mitigation measures be implemented beginning on August 18th in preparation for the 21-22 school year. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District Number 270 as follows. Section 1, the superintendent is hereby directed to implement the Hopkins Public Schools COVID mitigation measures to open the 21-22 school year. As circumstances warrant and guidance from the CDC, MDH, MDE change, the school board authorizes the superintendent to adjust those mitigation measures as needed. And Section 2, the superintendent is hereby authorized, after consultation with the school board chair and notification to the school board, to select and implement a different model for the school district or any specific school buildings without school board action if the superintendent reasonably believes that prompt implementation of a different model is necessary, and that constraints of time and public health considerations render it impractical to hold a school board meeting to approve the implementation. The model selected and implemented by the superintendent shall continue in effect unless and until the school board, in consultation with the superintendent and appropriate school district staff and public health officials, deems it in the best interest of the school district and its students to implement a different model. And Section 3, the superintendent will provide regular updates to the school board regarding the district's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance by MDE and MDH respectively. So I would look for a motion that the board passes the proposed Hopkins Public Schools health and safety measures for the 21-22 school year resolution.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Kahn.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye. Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is revised policy 808, face coverings. And I'll turn it over to our vice chair, who also heads up our policy work, Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you.
Since it doesn't really matter.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. For the board's consideration tonight, we are going to be looking at our policy 808 dealing with face coverings, given that we just passed a resolution that would require an adaptation to this policy. We are going to recommend that this gets passed without following our normal process of going through a second read. So we're recommending that it be passed through first reading so that it is in place for the first day of school, which is August 30th. And we are not going to have a board meeting before that. So in interest of time and urgency, asking for you to consider this policy. It is the policy that we already passed in 2020. The only change that was necessary is references to the governor's state of emergency declaration, and therefore is the same policy we passed already, just taking out reference to a state declaration of emergency that no longer exists. And I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot for more details.
Certainly. The policy modifications have been made to the document that's in front of you this evening to reflect what Director Andreessen has pointed out. If there are any specific questions, we stand open for what those might be related to the face covering policy.
I would also like to mention that other members of the policy committee were alerted to this and were given the opportunity to ask questions before tonight.
And did they have any?
They did not.
Oh, okay.
Remember.
We had no concerns. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yes, as I'm reading through, really the only difference is the removal of that language around the peacetime state of emergency, which we are no longer in. So in essence, it's the same policy that everybody was used to last year, has been following over the summer. We've been requiring masks in our summer programs as well. So no questions from me. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Well, I move that we pass the resolution in first reading.
Wonderful. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second that we pass the revised resolution in first reading. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson. I almost did it again, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Thank you, Clerk Peterson. Aye. 6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Next, we can move on to our board member reports.
Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Assistant
Thank you, COVID
Superintendent
mitigation
Lightfoot.
team. Appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, parents.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'll give my report.
Excellent.
All right. It actually turned out to be a fairly busy summer, surprisingly. On July 8th, I attended the AMSD end of session wrap-up, end of the legislative session wrap-up. One of the reasons it turned out to be busy this summer was our legislature could not get its work done until June 30th, and including allocating funds for education. So that kind of consumed the LAC's life for the month of June. Not that we could do anything about it, as it turns out. It was all negotiated behind closed doors, and we really had no access. But we did have a end of session wrap up at AMSD on July 8th. And subsequently, LAC also had an end of session wrap up with a couple of our legislators attending via Zoom. On the 18th of July, along with Superintendent Mary Perry Reed, I walked, and Director Cool, walked in the Raspberry Parade. We had a lot of representation from the Hopkins School District, so that was great to see. On July 21st, Superintendent Mary Perry Reed and I attended the mayor's and city managers meeting with some of the management from the cities that are touched by our district, and it's always informative. August 5th, I attended the MSBA summer seminar, and there's a great presentation that was given at that by Katie Peckel from the University of Minnesota Carey Institute, the Center for Academic Research and Education or something. And anyway, she also gave a report to AMSD last Friday. But the takeaway that I got from that was that there was more learning taking place during distance learning than a lot of people would have guessed. In fact, 2/3 of the parents interviewed thought that their kids learned as much or more during distance learning than they did in the classes before, in in-person classes. So that was reassuring. However, the social and emotional results were not as good. So kids experienced a lot more. I don't know what, maybe the rest of you can tell me what you experienced, but kids didn't have the opportunities to be socializing with their friends. They missed that. There were some that were emotionally traumatized by not having that interaction. So that is a concern, and hopefully by going to in-class or in-person classes this year, we can mitigate some of that. And then, like I said, on last Friday, attended the AMSD school year kickoff, which Katie Peckel gave a presentation again, a shorter version of it. And Paula Forbes, who we've employed here in the district as a consultant before, gave us an update on this, on the Cruz Guzman lawsuit and what is taking place in that. And so far, there's been no agreement. I had hoped that it would get resolved in mediation, but it has not. And a trial date has been set for 2022. So we're heading towards trial on that. And then LAC met just about every Friday this summer and strategized on what we might be working towards for the coming legislative session. That's my report.
Will you continue meeting on Fridays at 11:30 this year, do you know, Director Adams?
Currently, that's the plan. We've looked at other options, but so far haven't come up with one that we think is reasonable. No one wants to meet on Saturdays. So.
What about our board reps?
What's that?
Now that they're not in distance learning, that might be hard for our student board reps.
Yes, yeah.
So we might want to,
Look at a different time and date.
yeah. We'll be in touch.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, I know there is interest
Yes.
in the students to get more involved in the LAC.
Good.
So
Okay,
Well, and we had great reps last year.
yes.
Really, really helpful. I think to lots of conversations that we had.
Great. Thank you, Director Adams. Who else has a report?
I just have a request. Since school board work is starting up again, I'm going to start collecting names and contact information for students who want to be part of the Equity and Inclusion Student Advisory Group. You may remember that we had a group of students who worked really hard all year to come up with recommendations for the school board. Hopefully, I saw there were a few of them that were on the community engagement list that Dr. Mary Perry Reed shared with us. And so hoping that there are students that would be interested, if you know of any or if you are one, I can share out the form to sign up. We welcome anyone who wants to have their voice heard and make some really great change happen in the school district.
Thank you, and thank you for taking lead on facilitating that group again this year.
So much fun.
That's awesome. Good. Some of this work is supposed to be fun, right? Well, I had fun yesterday afternoon with my board colleagues. I hope you had fun too. We had a board retreat with the school board and cabinet, and really had a chance to hear updates from what our cabinet members are working on this year, some of their goals, how they're moving toward Vision 2031 and their specific areas. And then we engaged in our board goal setting process. And of course, as we're setting our board goals, we want to make sure that they reflect the priorities and concerns of our community members. And so we've settled on kind of 4 large areas for our goals, and we'll continue to refine what those goals and action items will be during our workshop on August 31st. So if you're interested in that process, invite you to tune in to that workshop. It will begin at 5 p.m. on the 31st. But the 4 areas are calendar equity, a broad category that includes a discussion around start times. Of course, work on our budget, which is ongoing. looking at some of our bigger policy pieces that we'd like to move on this year, including what is currently known as our discipline policy. And then I'm just anticipating that we will have at least 2 new board colleagues joining us in January, perhaps 3. And so looking at new board member orientation and culture building as another goal area. So it was great to spend time together and get some of that work done as we look to the year ahead. And yesterday, after the board retreat, I had a chance to attend a really special event at Normandale Community College where I work, but it was kind of like the running joke that I was not there in my capacity as a faculty member last night. I was there in my capacity as a board chair for the Black Men in Teaching reception. So there's a new program at Normandale that's focusing on cultivating Black male teachers, and it's a program where all of the tuition is covered for the Normandale portion of the experience. There's a really wonderful facilitator, a coordinator of that program, Marvis Kilgore, who was hired recently. And so the Normandale Foundation and the Black Men in Teaching program together hosted the event last night, and they had invited representatives from districts around the Twin Cities to come and check out what the program's about. So another really great way to continue to increase our Black male teachers in the state, and hopefully some of the men who move through that program and become teachers will become teachers in Hopkins. It's definitely the hope there. So it was a really lovely event and fun to connect more with that program. I'm sorry, I just jumped into my board member report. It was really rude. I saw a transition and I just went for it. Does anybody else have a board member report?
Come on, you guys.
I think I did the same thing, didn't I?
Chair Bouchard.
Director Cool.
I had the opportunity to spend most Fridays with Director Adams and the LAC, and I've got to tell you that I learned more from that group of 5 to 8 people about the function and dysfunction of the legislature that was quite amazing, quite honestly. And at the same time, I spent a lot of time this summer continuing to work with a lot of the large corporations that are throughout the cities, trying to work on internship opportunities and then also some partnerships. And it was really interesting taking some of the facts that we would talk about at LAC, and the businesses were kind of living through some of the same details and ups and downs, because so many of them are focused so much on education as one of their big corporate goals. And so it was very interesting how it was, we would talk about it on Friday, and then maybe the next Thursday, someone would give some of the same maybe frustrations or concerns of certain amendments that may have been floated in the past week. It was a really interesting, fantastic experience for me personally and also as a board member.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Thank you. All right. Last call for board member reports.
Well, this isn't really a report, sorry. I just wanted to quickly congratulate Dr. Mary Pierre-Reed for being on the AMSD Executive Committee.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
Really proud of that.
That's great.
I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's good to recognize that Kelsey Dawson-Walton, she's from the Osseo School District and on their school board. She was elected as board chair. And this is the first time that a Black woman has been an AMSD chair. So I think that's significant. And it's great because it represents our student population.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great updates. So I've received no comment cards for public comment on items not on the agenda. So we can move to adjournment, and I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you all.